Good morning. I was talking recently about painting the pink elephant, and I was saying it's an analogy for the elephant in the room in society that no one wants to talk about. And I said I'll talk about it because if you stay sweeping these things under the carpet and pretending that everything's different than it is, then you're never really going to address these issues, and you keep up this pretentious fucking bullshit uh, scene, which only really creates a market. You know what I mean? You're not actually dealing with the cause of anything. You just treat the symptoms, and everything gets progressively worse. So I'm going to start by talking about a video I seen recently with Gabor Mate. Now, I don't know if any of you know Gabor Mate, but he's a psychologist or yeah, maybe a psychiatrist or a psychologist, but he works in this area. Something like Peterson, but he makes his own videos on the wisdom of trauma and all this. And his own videos aren't bad, his videos on trauma and all is quite good. But his videos and all his trauma is quite good. But he said that one of the causes of trauma, one of the big causes of trauma is damage in the attachment relationships in the earlier years. Now that'd be one. Of course, you have PTSD, which would also tie into that. But we'll talk about that in another video. But this is damage in the attachment relationship in the formative years. And he said he couldn't understand why it didn't affect him in the childhood years, but it affected him then in later life. It affected him in later life. The trauma from these damage in the attachment relationships, as he put it, but he could never figure out why it only occurred in later life. But I would just set it off for the hypothesis, if you like, which would be a basis for reason, that is possibly because a child has not developed it has not established its own values or defined its own morality. Like to a child, everything is pleasant or unpleasant, but it hasn't actually defined what is morally right, what is morally wrong. Everything is just it doesn't have established values or any defined morals, and it doesn't really establish any values or defined morals until society imposes theirs upon them. Now that could come through the parents, or that could come through the school, or that could come through society in itself. But basically, like, my point I'm trying to make is that a lot of trauma comes from the trauma label that society puts on them. So when society imposes its morality on nature, that's where a lot of trauma comes from. That's where a lot of guilt and shame comes in. That's where a lot of betrayal comes in. That's when you start to realise, like, that like, for example, like, I remember going to secondary school and realising, because we always went to a country school when I was growing up, and well, to be honest, our house was a little bit different, It was a little bit different. Our house was a little bit different. Like, I remember getting 20, I was only thinking all day yesterday. I remember getting 28 quid for my confirmation, when everybody else was getting, 200, 300, for their confirmation. I remember the sum specifically, €28. And I remember saying to myself, are they lying, or what's the crack that I get 28 quid and they get fucking 200 and 300? But this was like back in the beginning. I never really, I was reared in a way that I never hankered after money. And I'm going to talk about this in another podcast. I'll talk about the golden calf and hankering after money and the implications of that. But I was never reared to hanker after money. But I remember just thinking, are they lying? Because obviously I'm going to sit back, and I was going to sit back at this age and ask myself, how come, why does everybody, especially at the back of the bus, everybody seemed to get 200 and 300, a minimum of 200, and I got 28 quid. And it wasn't that I felt any poor me or pity me, but I was just wondering why. And it wasn't until later life, like, I started to realise that nobody really came to visit us for a reason, you know what I mean? And then my father was quite proud as well, so he never brought us round, on confirmation day, he never brought us round anywhere. And then really, like, he had a bit of a thing about money, like, about taking money, but basically, anyway, there's a number of variables, which I did work out in the end, but basically, like, I had to realise, that there was a distinction to be made. And when I got to secondary school then, you move from the country into the towny folk and you realise, of course, that you're different for all sorts of reasons. But the big difference is that I never gave a fuck. And aren't I lucky to have such a nature that I never did give a fuck? You know what I mean? Because it's when people impose their morality upon you. Like, I could have felt all sorts of, I could have felt like a weirdo and this, that and the other. But really, like, remember on my 43rd birthday, my mother said to me, you and I, Dave, we're a little eccentric, And I remember saying, Jesus Christ, I'm like you. And I couldn't believe I was like me. I'd only realised at my 43 years of age that I was like my ma after years and years, because there's a sort of a denial, I suppose. But then after a while, anyway. But anyway, back to the trauma. So the universe then asked me at one point, have you suffered trauma? Because I was going through the whole trauma thing and what causes trauma, what causes PTSD and everything else. And it's very much, it's not the things that disturb us, but it's our opinion about the things. Now, that I could tell that to people all day long. And it's like saying to people, stay present and now. And all this wishy-washy affirmations and bullshit are absolutely, you might as well wipe your arse at them if you don't understand them. And if you don't have a deep understanding of life where you can practically apply them. Like I had well, I'll be honest, there was a man here recently, the man here recently. And talking about consciousness and he's getting all this information. Then the same man who was on about the acceptance. But I until I started using acceptance myself, but you know what I mean? This acceptance thing was very limiting because he was just accepting that God is ineffable. And accept this, because this is what Tolle said. God is ineffable. You just have to accept that God just is. We can't understand God, because if we try to understand God, God just... And God just is, and you have to accept this. You can't understand God. And I said to myself, that's a load of bollocks. I remember I smoked some DMT one time, and I put earphones on my head. I put the earphones on my head and smoked some. Before I smoked some DMT, I put on some shamanic drums. Like this. I was playing some shamanic drums and played the shamanic drums and smoked the DMT. And I went, of course, I always had a question before I took psychedelics or before I smoked the DMT. I always went to a question and came back with an answer. So I went to the question. I thought to myself before I smoked the DMT, I want to see this. Show me the size of the universe. I want to understand the magnitude of the universe. And then I was playing the shamanic drums, and I stood up then and I pulled off the fucking headphones and threw them down the ground. I said, stop. I wasn't able for the download, because I could see I could see a lot, but the brain just completely overloaded, and I just had to pull off the headphones and say, stop. I wasn't able for it. And then after this, I concluded that how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And I suppose, and this is that if you accept that God is nature, and then once you accept this, but this doesn't come with just a blind acceptance. This comes with a physics breakdown, of physics, and that's why I sent him away because I said to myself, you can talk about this consciousness, but just because Tull has limited himself, or because the Buddhists and the Hindus 5,000 years ago, yes, they did great work, but they did not have a physics model. They did not have the science that we have now, that we can actually break down and yes, put concepts on things. But these this is how we relate to all life. And unless you can understand it from a physics model, then you can start to understand that 0 point energy and consciousness are one and the same. And it'll give you a better understanding of consciousness and something that you can actually apply in real life and give you a better handle on life. But just like having this information and no application for it is not going to serve you at all. It's just not going to serve you at all. So it's no point, like I can talk to you here till I'm blue in the face, but if you don't start get the handle on this shit, it's of absolutely no application to you. Do you understand what I'm saying? But I'm going to finish my story about the trauma, because I wanted to tell you a story about the trauma. So the universe asked me, have you ever experienced trauma? And I says, no, I can't, no. And then it flashed this image through my head. And I'll tell you now the image that flashed through my head. I remember one time when I was about 7 years of age, 6 or 7 years of age, 7. I was hitting this hurling ball against a wall. The hurling ball, for those you don't know, a sliotar is a rock. It's a leather. It's a cork bound in cord and a leather. It's for all the world like a baseball, but leather ball. It's for all the world like a baseball, but it's for hurling. And I was there hitting this ball off the wall, and the ball was hopping off the wall and come back to me. I'd catch the ball again, catch the ball, strike it against the wall again. But the outlet, my father was going across the yard. And now the father needed a hip replacement, so he was sort of going across like this, like sort of like he was dragging his leg because he needed a hip replacement. So he used to sort of sift across the yard like this. So there he was going across the yard like this. And I said, I'll get one more shot in before he crosses my path. But of course I struck the ball. I hit the ball, struck him straight there on the head with the sliotar. Now, I'm sure it hurt, because it's a hard fucking ball, and I gave it my best shot, but I struck him there on the side of the head. Now, for some reason, he started to move towards me then. He never even said a thing, just started to move towards me, and I could see the colour changing. I could see he was fucking livid. But it was such a scary sight to see him coming through me now. He wasn't a small man. And to see him coming towards me was such a scary sight, I completely froze. This is a cortisol response. Now, I had plenty of time to get away because he was, as I say, slinking towards me. And I had plenty of time to get away, but I had a complete cortisol response. So you go like a possum. You know what a possum does? A possum plays dead. But that's because it gets a cortisol response. Its brain completely overloads and it freezes. It can't comprehend. It can't work. And this is what I was trying to explain the other day. This is a cortisol response. So I had a cortisol response, and I was like a rabbit stuck in the headlights, you know what I mean? Like, you ever see a rabbit stuck in the headlights, when a car is coming towards it, it gets a cortisol response. It shits its pants. It can't move. So there I was, and I was stuck in a cortisol response. And the owlet came over, and he took the hurl out of my hand. And he held me by this arm here, like this, and bent me around in circles with the hurl. Round and round, like with the hurl, bent me around in circles. And that was, I suppose. And then I said, and then the universe said to me, was that traumatic? And I says, is that what you're calling trauma? I thought that was just life. And this is what I'm trying to explain to you. This for me was life. Now, if we were in the modern day and I went into school and I was relating this story, maybe every wanker in the fucking in the Tusa or whatever you call them, all the fucking pragmatic bastards, all the fucking people who want to impose their morality on life and impose their morality on nature, maybe they'd all be coming along and maybe they would have said, maybe they would say, oh, that was child abuse, you can't hit the child, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do the other. And maybe there would have been a big fucking hullabaloo about it, and then maybe I would have had a trauma label which would have stuck with me for the rest of my life, that this would have caused damage in my attachment relationships. Do you understand what I'm saying? But basically what I'm saying is this was just a part of life for me. This was just an experience. But what I'm trying to say is that society is not taking any responsibility for the trauma that it's actually creating using its trauma label. Basically, the society is pointing all these fingers and imposing its morality on nature. But what I'm saying is, this is what I'm trying to say. I used to see I may hurry on with this. I used to see the people at the rainbow gathering dancing around the fire and used to say, "The sun will heal us, the fire will heal us, the river will heal us." I said, well, you're sort of looking in the wrong place for the healing, like. You're sort of looking in the wrong place for the healing. Because if you want to heal yourselves, you're going to have to look to understand nature. And then when you understand nature, that underlying current of anger will disappear. But basically, you're going to have to overcome, establish your own values and define your own morality and not have them imposed by you, by fucking... Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay, good morning.